Hello, everybody. So I haven't been able to record every single play session. We're now at 25 million. So we're close, but we're cutting it very, very close given how much time we have left. However, I did have a thought that I kind of wanted to talk through. And I figured, well, I should probably record this, and I do have a little bit of time to record right now. So I will. But the thought that I had is, man, Albion Online is doing very well, very popular. Something to be really happy about. I love seeing the cities and the towns completely full. I love seeing all the zones completely, brimming with players. But it was really funny when it is that I decided to do this series to get to, buy my own premium, because I am fighting for scraps out here, gathering in safe zones and in yellow zones. I think it is so packed right now with other players, and a lot of them are gathering as well. If I run into blue zones, I'm in a yellow zone right now. If I were to be in a blue zone right now, every blue zone around the city has about 30 players on it, and I feel like 20 of those players are just gathering. It's kind of insane. So obviously this is a very good thing for the game. It makes the game feel really lively. It's just an odd timing for me to have decided to buy my own premium at this time instead of just buy it with some cash. But that's the name of the game, that's the name of the series. And so yeah, I'm kind of fighting for scraps out here. Like what you're watching now is what I've been kind of having to do most of today, because it's extremely busy today, being a Sunday, as well as winter break. I think a lot of people are on break or on holiday and they have time to play, and so it is extremely busy right now. Trying to expand my reach to other zones instead of just blue zones. So I am coming into the yellow zones to see if I could find any good patches of gathering nodes, but it is rough right now. It's extremely rough. I also think there's probably a faction fight going on this map. It looks like I can see the big group over there on the map, and I am faction flagged. And I have been wanting to, so I kind of forgot to faction flag a couple of times, which really sucks because those were those like really long, hour-long runs that I did. But I have been wanting to keep my faction flag up while I'm gathering, because I do get to fill up my daily rewards for faction, and I'm so close to getting the full rewards. And of course, the whole time limit, the reason the time limit is even here is because we're trying to cash in all these rewards that I actually do have from having been playing so much recently. So I want to be able to actually accept those, and you need premium to accept those. So it's become, I'm sure that was the intention behind that dark pattern that the developers put there, to hey, if you redeem this, you get all these rewards, and I do want to redeem those rewards. I think I would be worthy of them if I could get to 31 million. But yeah, definitely slowed down a bit in being able to gather, just because again, there's been so many players on, and it's been a little bit more difficult to get consistent runs, because it's like a patchwork of gathering nodes that are out there right now. And it's good if you're a lower level player, because it takes you longer to gather each node, but when you're just like sucking up those T4s or whatever, like it's not great. It definitely feels very slow. Okay, let me see if I can pull those as well. God. But yeah, I did want to kind of just capture that thought, because I was thinking like it's so funny how technically that just means the game's doing really well. Like all of the cities, all of the zones, all of the maps are very well populated, but it just so happens to be working against me in trying to get to that 31 million. Additionally, another kind of thought that I wanted to think about is, what am I actually going to do when I get to 31 million? I don't know if I should spend that money, because when I started the series, I kind of just wanted to show what it would be like to grind for, my own 31 million without premium. Because I was like, is this game playable if you don't have the premium? Which now I know for sure 100%, like, not having the premium bonus, sure, you lose out on like 50%, but if I wanted to like not be paying attention to buying premium, the game is completely playable like this. I mean, if I wasn't trying to rush to buy premium right now, I would just be playing the game exactly as I was before. I would probably be, instead of selling all my stuff, I would probably be focusing on leveling up all of my refining skills, which I could be doing right now, but I did do a bit of testing, and only because, literally only because of the potential to get adept fawns that drop from these stags, while completely focusing on just gathering. Only because of that, it turns out it's a little bit more profitable, or it kind of equals itself out without all of the other steps, to just stick to gathering right now. But if I wasn't trying to rush to that 31 million, I would just be chilling. I would just be crafting, leveling up my crafting. I really want to get to craft my own weapons and gear, and like get into like the enchantments and all that kind of stuff, because I do like the glow that the weapons emit when you enchant them, I guess, and I don't know how to do that yet. So as soon as this little challenge that I posed for myself is done, I'm going to focus on doing that. But until then, we persevere. We try to complete this challenge. Other than that, didn't have that much in my mind, and I'm realizing right now that I just had that little thought. Another reason why I haven't been recording lately too is, number one, the progress for these is it did slow down, and then number two, I just didn't have a lot to say. I think that was a theme on my other video as well. But it's been nice this winter break. I mean, maybe I could talk about that a little bit, but this winter break is probably one of the most disconnected from the world type ones that I've had. I know there's a lot of things kind of going on always, and there's that kind of thing where it's like you can only be so aware anyway. There's just so many things going on all the time. But this particular winter break has felt very nice because I feel like a bit more centered in, like, what I can control and where I exist, which is like around my family, around my neighborhood, around my community. That's kind of been the theme of this break, is that like I'm actually just very present this time around for this particular break. I don't really know why, I don't really know what's different, what happened, but like this year I feel like, especially early in the year, like February, March, I was thinking to myself, like, man, I really just want to be more focused on like being present around, just my family, just in my community, just something like that, like not really trying to be everything everywhere all at once for everybody, and more so just focusing in on the things that kind of matter most, which is kind of like the direct things that you can affect, which is like your direct loved ones and things like that. And that has been extremely nice. Just to not, it's weird because the world makes you think, like, you're on social media, right? And you'll be watching, the news, you'll be watching what's happening on. It's like there's so many horrible things happening all the time. At the same time, there's no levers in front of me. There's not a lever that I can pull to fix X or Y, more so than I'm already doing, which is like I'm a pretty outspoken individual. I don't let things slide at like any occasions, right? Like when somebody's being ignorant, I try to correct them, because that ignorant person could be influencing a slew of different things, and so I just want to make sure that people aren't misinformed, things like that, whatever. That's as much as I can do, is just try to make sure that like people that I know, friends, family, or whatever, are not part of the group making it harder to like progress or like treat people decently, or like just in general trying to be a good advocate of certain causes or whatever. But at the same time, you're just like, everybody, a lot of people are just a person trying to stay above water, pay their bills, like do their things that they need to do, take care of their family, show up for their loved ones. And so it's like you only have so many levers, and it kind of sucks because one of the ways that I think about like governments is I kind of think of governments as just like overly self-important HOAs. Like a government shouldn't be more prestigious, in my opinion, than an HOA. We should have as much disdain for everybody in a government as we do for the organization that is an HOA. Because all it's supposed to do is it's supposed to be this really boring job where people make sure that we all pool in some money together, right? Those would be your HOA dues or fees or whatever, and in the government's case it would be taxes. and that with that money we do things for the community that we live in, right? And that we focus in our community and our people, and making sure that we have certain needs met, because that's all our money that we're pulling together in that giant HOA. And it's supposed to basically be just reporting where that money's going, making sure it's being used exactly for what the community members agreed that their money would be used on, and then basically just supporting accounting tasks along the way, and just reporting and auditing that, making sure that that's exactly how our government's being run. And it really shouldn't really do much else than that. And yet every single government just becomes this center of power for egomaniacs that want to turn it into something more, that want to basically just mold it into another monarchy if they can get away with it. And so it's annoying, because we should all be about as invested in politicians as we are HOA members, which is hopefully zero. Which hopefully you're not part of an HOA board that has turned into its own sitcom and is now its own and has its own level of weird prestige or something, because it shouldn't be. It should just be a boring job. Nobody should even want to work it. Everybody that works that job should be literally what's it called? Nobody should be almost excited to help. It should be just because maybe you're the right person for the job, but you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's weird. It's weird how we've turned a lot of governments into sports teams, for one. The fandom around it, it's basically K-pop stands, but now it's just for politicians. Nobody should be standing for a politician. I don't know. Just what weirdness. But anyway, all that to say that it has been really nice to get back to center. I think part of that is also being in a workplace environment. You also are near a lot of information that reminds you of oh man, this is this is a drag and this is a drag, and it makes you feel you are supposed to somehow fix that thing that is a drag for other people, even though you had nothing to do with it. It's completely on them, all this kind of stuff. And so it's nice to kind of disconnect from it that way too, because if I'm not on social media, I'm being reminded of stuff that is outside of my control, but still horrible, via work. So just being disconnected from both work and social media, other than YouTube, of course, has been kind of nice. TikTok has been kind to me and not fed me too much rage baity stuff recently, so that's nice. It looks like they maybe lowered the propaganda lever down a little bit. But other than that, it's just been nice to be with family as well, and to remember why do you go to work? Why do you go and try to make money? Why do you go and try to make sure you have a little bit of savings? Why do you go and work so hard? It's because you're trying to take care of the people around you, and take care of yourself so that you can continue to take care of the people around you. And that's all that most decent human beings are trying to do. Nobody's really trying to do anything more complicated than that, and unfortunately the world just makes things more complicated. I have this theory of why that is, and I think it goes back to how it's so much simpler to tell a truth than a lie. Your brain works harder to tell a lie because you have to come up with a lie, so that takes a bit of brain power. You have to come up with rebuttals for the lie because you're telling the lie. You have to come up with a story around the lie to support it, because you're lying and it's not true, and so you have to concoct something that makes sense. And so you have to do all of these special things when you're lying, that are just extra work than just simply telling the truth. And in a way, I think that the same thing happens with a lot of things in life that should be really simple, but they're not. It's really a lot of people lying about how complicated something is when it's really not. It's actually super simple. And they can't tell you that it's simple because somewhere along the lines, and here's that stag that I talked about, that's the depth font that makes this all worth it. But somewhere along the lines, it could have been really simple, but somebody tried to, somebody added a little white lie because they wanted to, I don't know, make a little bit more money for themselves, be a little bit better off than the other person. And that kind of turns into the snowball of you have to tell one line and then another one and then another one and then another one. And then all of a sudden we're all lying to ourselves about the importance of, oh my God, so many things. I think a lot of corporate stuff is so self-important and not important at the same time. I think a lot of governmental stuff is just so made out to seem like it's so important, and it's just not. If you were to look at it on paper, most government processes and political processes should just be an accounting task, should just be, you know, a multiple choice question. And, you know, I don't want to get too abstract and or even too direct, but because, you know, it's hard to kind of come up with an example for this. But it's just so, there's so many things that are so made out to seem so important, and at the same time they're not, and we all know they're not. And I think we all know they're not, especially in our actions, because I think, like, I'll give you a work example. If people work in corporate, I guess for those that do work in corporate, you know, your work at the same time is always an urgency. It's always late. It's always, you have to get it done ASAP. You have to, you know, make sure that this is done by this date, and there's all this urgency, there's all this priority, there's all this, like, you know, importantness to it. I can't really talk tonight. It's getting a little late. And at the same time, deadlines will be missed all the time. Some executive will decide to say something that requires revisions or reviews or all these things, and all this thing, and this thing that was supposedly really important to get right becomes this convoluted mess of, you know, just keeps getting later and later and later. This happens at every company. Every single one that I've ever worked has the same problem. All the friends that I have at other companies have the same problem. It happens everywhere. The super important thing that was super important for everybody to get right, everybody gets wrong 25 times a day, and it gets delayed and delayed and delayed, and, you know, later and later and later, and everybody always ends up, you know, you put a date that was supposed to be like the due date for something, and that's the fake one, and you always know the real one is like way out there, and you end up always passing the fake one and then just actually giving everybody the work on the real one, the one that should have been the deadline all along. And so it's obvious that that thing is not that important. Like, if you're working at a company that launches any product that is a product that doesn't actually directly save somebody's life, if it's launching any product that is not a medical product that literally saves people's lives, or that is not some kind of, like, important you know, piece of equipment for, like, I don't know, space travel, because that's one of the things that could save people's lives, right? You don't want a rocket blowing up or something. But if you work at a company that's just making knickknacks, that's just making consumer goods, just making stuff that's like whatever, and you have this super important deadline that supposedly everybody's trying to hit, the moment that you kind of step out of that and realize how arbitrary those launch dates for things are, how arbitrary deadlines are, how arbitrary everything is, you start realizing, damn, there's so many lies told along the way that made this one thing so self-important that so many people could actually believe that it was important all along, when it was actually super simple and not that important. And I think in my example, the lie is the due date. The lie was when this thing was supposed to be due. The truth is, the person told you that date because if you got it to them by that date, they would have a bunch of time to mess around on their end, because they know that if they get it early, oh, well, now we have so much additional time to give feedback, and I'm really bad at giving feedback, so I need that additional time. But I don't want that. I can't say that. I can't say, hey, I need it by this date just so that I can look at it and have enough time to look at it because I'm so bad at giving feedback and direction. No. The due date is because of some made up reason. Maybe it's like a retail reset. Maybe it's some important event. Maybe it's some whatever. It's some reason. But the truth is, it's just that person's really bad at being prompt at their job and giving you feedback on time or something. And so it compounds upon itself. It snowballs. There's all these lies, and then it becomes super important. This weird date that somebody just came up with on a whim becomes like a Bible that people must all follow, and that basically rules every single thought that you have until that project is done, because it's now this just thing that everybody's kind of going for. And it's kind of like even similar to what I'm doing here in Albion, right? Like, I put a date that I need to finish my premium by, right? In 2 days, server resets, and I need those rewards. But that's kind of arbitrary. Like, I don't really need those rewards. I kind of know what's in there. I'll get another chance to do it. I could just like not rush. And I do keep that in mind, that it actually doesn't matter. But I think there's always a level of theater to life where you have to pretend like certain things matter when they don't, because it helps other people feel okay. Like, I think one of the things that I've noticed as I've gotten older and you know, working in corporate for almost 10 years is there are certain people that really need you to pretend that something is important, and they'll never admit that it's literally because it makes them feel better, but you can see it. You can see that it's just because it makes them feel better. And I witnessed it in action when, during a very, very tough year, couple of years actually, in my career, I had to kind of just break. Like, I kind of had to just say, hey, like, at the end of the day, XYZ, whatever, is not that important. Or, we don't need to stress this much out for XYZ, whatever. And I said that out loud. I said, at the end of the day, like, these launch dates are arbitrary. Like, our customer doesn't really care if this thing launches on this random arbitrary date in like August or something. Like, why are we basing this entire project around this date? Like, we should launch this thing on a reasonable timeline, of course. But it's like, it's not a retail reset. It's not anything that's important. Or stocking this in a physical location, or getting it on Amazon, or anything like that. It was just, an arbitrary made up deadline that was based off of standard processes, all this boring crap. And I remember I said that out loud. Like, I literally just mentioned it out loud. And I could see the light fade from this person's eyes, whose entire job is the timeline, or like their entire job is to pretend like these kind of events are like important. And I realized how important it was to them for it to be important, because it was a fuel to their career. Because if the thing that they need to deliver something by is important, and they're the ones that control whether that thing is delivered on that date, then that means that when that thing is delivered on the date, they get to achieve something. And when they get to achieve something, they get to put that achievement on a resume. And then when they put that achievement on a resume, they get to be better prepared for when they need to look for another job, because everybody's jobs is laying them off now, and there's no like consistent employment over time. And so what's been happening in corporate America is that we've essentially turned a bunch of super unimportant things into the most important things in the world, out of like almost like a self-defense mechanism to ensure that as you get older, as these things get quote unquote more important, it sets you up better from when you inevitably have to get laid off, or the company goes under or something, or rather. Because it just continues to happen, because that's the biggest constant in corporate America right now, and what has been since COVID, honestly, is that you're going to get laid off. The biggest constant is that people are going to get let go, people are going to need to find other jobs. And so a solution to that has increasingly been to make sure that while you have a job, you kind of complete these things that look really important, because you're going to need all the help you can get finding your next job. And I think, I really feel for people that are kind of trapped in that rat race, because that is what it is. It's a rat race, number one. But then additionally, it's just so such a death loop, I mean, I have people that I work with that are peers, and I hear some of the most scary things sometimes, of them passing out, or of them having health problems, all this kind of stuff. And all of that stuff, I mean, it'll be things that is obviously rooted in stress, and rooted in just stress, and that stress is the result of, again, like, pretending and believing so much that these things are important. And I mean, for my own health, really, for my own trying to survive here, because at the end of the day, like, the point is to make money to give to your family, but you need to be there to give to your family, or to support your family, or whatever, or to at least kind of reap some kind of benefit, or be present to earn your reward. And so I'm not really in a rush to let a really arbitrarily stressful job take me out. So I do really even see it as like a life or death thing, of like, hey, if it's life or death and you really need to choose what's important, this random arbitrary thing that your company wants you to care about, or literally your life, please always choose your life. Oh my God. I could not care less if the companies that I work for all go under. There's also this kind of importance that is put on establishment companies that have been around for a long time. And there's this kind of vibe, this idea that, like, they have to survive. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about here, but it'll come up in like news stories. It'll come up on, you know, people's YouTube channels will talk about this. You'll definitely see this on TikTok. There's this kind of vibe, definitely on Wall Street and stuff like that, that the idea of certain very important companies going under is somehow bad. Now, if I was to look at history, that would never be true. Technically, certain companies going under often signal the real evolution, like a real move forward, a progress forward, right? Certain things in economies and governments and things like that have to break in order for progress to actually happen. The more that you delay that progress, the more that you delay that thing breaking, the more pain that people are in, while everybody is still trying to hold up the facade, right? It becomes like a group project to hold up this facade of a company or facade of a government or whatever, to hold up the appearance. You know, it becomes this actual group project to hold that up, rather than to let it fall and reveal the truth behind it, so that you can then honestly build off of it. And it goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, like, it takes so much more effort to lie. And right now, like in government, in corporate America, even in fields in education, we're lying to ourselves so much. And I think we've been lying to ourselves for a really long time about how important these institutions are and how important these kind of governments are and how important like a lot of things are. And we've been lying to ourselves for a really long time, I think, because newer generations have started to scrape away at what's really important. And they've kind of clocked that, you know, certain things are too theatrical. You know, this idea of being performative got kind of popular on TikTok. And I was thinking about it because it was like, everything is a performance. I mean, you go to a corporate America and you dress and act a certain way. Even me, here's the funniest thing. I work in gaming. And when I had to go get a job, I was, the advice that I was given is to not dress too formal, right? You're going to a gaming company, don't wear a suit. You're not going to go in a suit. You're going to look like an idiot if you go in a suit. The decision to not wear a suit is not saying that I'm not performative. That is a performance in itself. I would have worn a suit. The suit itself is also a performance. The only thing that could have not been a performance is if I went to that interview that day and went in like whatever I woke up. That would have probably been the only way that wasn't a performance. But any decision where I'm putting a suit or I'm not putting on a suit, it's a performance I'm trying to put on to court a potential employer, to let them know, hey, like I'm whatever this is that you want to hire me for. I'm game, and that's what I'm here for. Man, it's so annoying that guy aggroed the damn wizard. I don't know if he did that on purpose. But it's all a performance. It's funny that like that performative thing like kind of became a popular topic, because I actually see so many things as they say, you know, the performative is being said in this negative tone, but to be able to put on a performance for people is actually so important. I'll bring up, you know, the idea of the jester, the court jester, the idea of being the fool or playing the fool. That is a performance, and it's a performance that has allowed certain people to not only survive but become like important parts of a king's you know court. And you think about that for a second, like performing is important. I sometimes remember the days where I was younger and I would be on Reddit a lot, and I would be reading a lot of Reddit posts about people having like just the hardest time like fitting in at their school or like with their friends or with their family or whatever. And what they would often describe is this idea where like they're being themselves, and you know, like their family just doesn't understand, and they're trying to, you know, they want to do X, their family's like stuck on doing Y, they just don't understand. And what I often actually was witnessing when they were describing these things is if you take a step back, what was happening, or what I kind of perceived as happening, is like they wanted other people to accept them, or like a lot of us, I think, want other people to accept us unconditionally. But actually, your ability to perform a little bit, to put up the act a little bit, to show a little bit of interest in other people's hobbies and other people's interests, would have helped you, or helps everyone, for other people to open up to yours, right? Like if I just go into a random group of people, say we're at a bar or something, and I just walk up to them with like a Game Boy. And I'm actually not a huge drinker. I actually hate bar culture. I actually am not an extrovert, and I hate being extroverted, and I actually hate being there, and I hate everything about the area, right? Hate. And I just walk up to them with my Game Boy, thinking that Game Boys are cool, Pokemon's cool, and I'm like, hey man, like, you guys want to see my Pokemon? And all I'm doing is trying to show them my Pokemon, and in my view, it's like, well, Pokemon's way cooler than whatever they're doing. So obviously, I'm going to show them my Pokemon or whatever. I would probably, I mean, in the best case scenario, I would be ignored. In the worst case scenario, and the most common scenario that I would think of is I would probably be clowned on, if not beaten up, depending on, you know, the time period that we're doing this. And in my view, rightfully so, it's kind of selfish, right? To like walk up to a group of people, even your family themselves, show no interest in what they're doing, why they're there, who they are, and then, you know, walk up to them supposedly acting completely yourself. In that scenario, acting completely yourself is actually not the best move, right? Like even if let's say you were being 100% authentic and putting every single wall and barrier and act and mask down, being able to perform is a very important skill for like socializing. Like just being able to put up and act a little bit. It doesn't mean that you have to what's that word, like lay down your morals or like completely change who you are, you know, from an ethical standpoint, right? Not at all. If anything, don't do that. That would be horrible. But like, you know, act a little bit excited about people's interest. Be a little bit more curious. And at first you might be faking it, but then later on, especially as you learn about people, because I mean, I'm literally just talking about myself here, is like, I used to really hate small talk. I used to say out loud, like, man, I hate small talk. I don't get people that like small talk. But that's because I wasn't realizing, or I was thinking that small talk was this thing that people did authentically because they love it. And I wasn't realizing that small talk is just a tool that certain people learned how to use and understand it as a tool to be able to help people open up a little bit, right? It's harder to commit to really deep conversations right off the gate. There's very few people that want that immediately. Especially as you get older, because people get guarded and people understand that like certain people, especially people that are willing to do that, a little bit too willing to do that off the gate, are usually not the best people that you want around. Unfortunately, it seems to be a pattern that happens. So you want a little bit of small talk to, I mean, I hate to use all of the cliches, but to break the ice, to just, you know, allow people to feel a little bit more comfortable talking. Like you're kind of testing the water, you know, you're not jumping direct first into like cold ocean. You're just slowly but surely testing the barriers of what this person is okay talking about, how they are okay talking about it, what it is they like. Being able to do all that is a performance. You're performing, and you know, you're acting a little bit and you're doing it out of courteousness. It's actually not fake. It's not inauthentic. It's not like this thing where you have to be inauthentic. Like, again, don't sacrifice your morals or who you are. You know, if somebody, at the end of the day, if somebody is in front of me and they're just being 100% belligerent and ignorant, I'm not going to try to acquiesce to that. I'm not going to like start acting that way so that they feel more comfortable. I'm probably going to push back. But if it's like well-meaning individuals, if it's just decent human beings, like, yeah, you be courteous just the way that you would be courteous to anybody visiting a house, you know, your house. You try to make them feel comfortable. You're almost like a guest in that conversation, and you're just trying to ease them in to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, lost that socialization period where they learned to do that, or they never learned to do that. They never really like caught on to that. And it hurts a lot because you kind of walk around thinking like, I'm being so authentic and everybody else is being fake. And it's not really about that. It's just, you know, yes, you might be being authentic, but you're not being courteous to other people's feelings. Or at least that's kind of what I've learned when you come off too strong, when you don't leave space for somebody else to, you know, say their piece or talk about themselves a little bit. I think, you know, there's that meme where people will say that, you know, conversations at bars or, you know, with shallow people are all about, you know, the two shallow people just waiting, like they're not even listening to what you're saying. They're just kind of waiting to listen to when you stop talking so that they can just say whatever they want to say, whatever they want to talk about. That is bad. Like, don't do that. Don't be that person. But at the same time, I think a lot of conversations are opportunities where people get to express themselves. I mean, I'm saying this as a person that doesn't really even like a lot of, extroverted environments. And, a part of that is just because I've learned, one, I get kind of like socially exhausted. I don't have a giant social battery. I can do it. I can be very social. I mean, I was a PR major, for God's sake, so I know how to run a good mixer. But I have a low social battery, and after a while, like, it shows. Like, I can only keep up the act for so long. It is exhausting to keep up an act. The reason that going to those social events, or going to any kind of like very public event where you have to talk to different people feels sometimes like you ran a marathon is because you are literally holding up a mask, right? Like, you are literally holding up an act a little bit. Again, it's like, it doesn't have to be completely inauthentic or not yourself, but you're trying to be courteous. You're trying to keep your poise. It's almost kind of like trying to hold your back up straight instead of slouching all the time. You might be slouching all the time, but sometimes you need to hold your back straight, right? Just to look a certain way, to come off a certain way. But it's like doing that, but with your communication. And so it does feel exhausting. It feels like running a lap. But it's all about courtesy, I think. It's all about just knowing that the reason that's happening is because, it's kind of like a form of kindness. It's like, I'm saving you from everything that I am, because everything that I am might be just a bit exhausting, right? But if you're curious, and through this small talk, I'll discern if you're curious about who I am, then yeah, I'll lay it on. But I think people really like those. I mean, I think it's kind to do that, because people really like those times whenever they get a chance to talk to somebody that's like, okay, this is a person who, I've gauged it after the small talk, and now we can kind of talk about maybe some deeper topics, something more interesting. I think people do want that a lot. And I think in our kind of age, I think during the millennial era, during the era of like Reddit being a thing, I feel like a lot of people closed themselves off to that experience because they labeled themselves. They like took on the identity of like an introvert. And man, I mean, I don't even want to get into the conversation of just hating labels and hating identities. I remember a time in this is a whole other video that I want to make. I'm gonna like verbally bookmark this here, because I want to make a whole other video on just labels and identities. Because there was a time that I remember, of a golden time that I remember in my childhood, where everybody I knew actually really didn't want to be identified or labeled as anything. Almost like a punk rock type of time period where, like, you could call me whatever you want, but I'm gonna say no to that to every label, because I don't want to be any label. And I think there was a lot of people that were around me at the time. I was in high school, so I wasn't even paying attention to the news that much back then. This was early high school, so I can't even tell you if this was like a phenomenon that was happening all over the world. But I remember, just for me, there was a time period where people started to not want to identify as anything. Like, we weren't the skater kids, we weren't the emo kids, we weren't the scene kids, we weren't the rocker kids, we weren't the rockabillys, we weren't anything. Everybody around me just kind of just wanted to do their thing. And if somebody asked me, like, or asked my friends, or asked people around me, like, oh, are you guys like skater kids? Like, you dress like skater kids, or like you kind of dress a little bit like, are you into hip hop? Are you into this? Like, whatever, like, doesn't matter. The answer back would be like, oh, I don't know, like, I don't know what the hell I am. Like, I don't really care about the label. I remember distinctly there was this time period where nobody cared about the label. And I found that beautiful, because I think the biggest, menace in society is the ability for tribalism to occur, for like identities to essentially dictate how people perform and act and treat other people. And yeah, so there was that golden time period where I remember that was kind of starting to tear apart, at least with the people around me. And it was great. It was great to not have to identify with a label of any kind, and be able to just kind of feel like you were being yourself. Like, all of a sudden you weren't being a punk rock kid, or you weren't a skater, because people were calling me skater, like early in high school, and it made me feel like I needed to get a skateboard. Like, genuinely, like, that's how powerful labels are. Where, like, I think about the kids that get labeled jocks, or like the sporty kids when they get labeled that when they're young. There's a lot of kids that I grew up knowing that, they never really thought about if they actually liked sports. They never really thought about if they actually wanted to, be in sports all the time, and that's what the track they wanted to take to like college and stuff like that. They were just always called like you know, the athletic kid, the jock, whatever, and they took on that personality because that's what they were continually called. And you can imagine how effective this is too on children that haven't made up like their mind or their view of the world yet themselves, and they haven't experienced that much. You can imagine how powerful it is to be called a jock, or to be told you're this, or to be told you're that, to be told your stuff all the time. Kids get pushed being told they're something all the damn time, and you can imagine the effects that has on people. And then, you know, later on, you know, those friends that were jocks or whatever, they would say like, actually I never fucking liked sports. And now they're in college and they're on this like, you know, they're on this football program, and they actually just can't wait to like not be like, some of them would even like feign injuries because they actually just didn't like playing in sports. Like they just realized that and kind of came to. And it's funny that people always look at college as this coming to period for a lot of young adults. They say like, oh, people always change in college. What I think is, well, people always reveal themselves in college, because college is the one time where, you know, nobody's making your schedule anymore. Your teachers care about you a little bit less, which is good. And they're not labeling you anything. Like you stop getting labeled as much in college by individuals, or at least you get this agency to know that now you have to label yourself. Now you have to decide who you are, you know, regardless of the labels that you've been given before. And I think people come into themselves and start realizing a lot of things about themselves in college, and start realizing just how wrong maybe the people around them were by labeling them everything damn else under the sun. I remember labels and identities that I was given growing up like had an effect on me. Like there was a time period where people really wanted me to be a musician, and that was kind of becoming like my identity. I was the musician person. And then I just realized like I love music, I love singing, I love playing guitar, I love even playing piano, even though I'm really bad at it because of another identity problem that I'll get into. But I loved all these things, and then I realized that like, you know, even though I love it, it doesn't necessarily mean I have the discipline and the passion to be a musician, like a real proper musician. And so when I started, you know, getting into that position of like, no, now it's the time for me to come into my own of like, am I really a musician? Am I really going to do these shows? Am I really going to pursue this as a career? The answer was no, because the passion and the discipline that you need to actually be a real musician is different than just being good at singing and singing covers at your high school or like at shows and things like that. But I think there was this identity that was thrusted upon me from a very young age, just because I had an aptitude for certain things, and it was just messing with my trajectory. I mean, I wasted a lot of time, to be honest. I mean, I shouldn't call it as waste, because ultimately I like the fact that I can play guitar. I like the fact that I can understand music. To a certain extent, I'm not like an expert in music theory or anything like that. But you know, I do enjoy the knowledge that I have of it and the experience, of course. But it kind of, you know, it pushed me away from other things that I probably would have liked to spend more things on had I not been just given the title of like, you're the musician kid, kind of too early on in my life. And I know everybody means well, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think sometimes, you know, adults are a little bit heavy-handed on the way they apply labels to kids, because they want, you know, everybody wants kids to succeed and to find their own. But I think sometimes it just comes in a little bit too strong, I guess. So that did kind of affect me. But it's funny that, you know, the music thing, even rolling into that, I started to come back to this, was due to a label. When I was younger, I actually really did want to play piano. I loved the piano classes my dad put me in. It was so cool that I had an aptitude for it, and I was blazing through that class. I remember the teacher gave us like an assignment. He gave us a book, and he said, you guys are going to go and learn Ode to Joy and then come back next week. And I remember thinking like, I learned Ode to Joy in the class. It's not going to take me a week to learn this. So I just started learning all of the songs one by one through the whole book. And by the time the week rolled around, I knew the entire book. And the teacher would point to a page and he'd say, oh, can you play this one? And I would just play it. And some of them I didn't even remember how to play 100%. But what happened is I learned that I could very easily sight read, that I actually was reading the music. And I could actually very easily sight read it and play it back a little slowly. I'm not over here being Mozart right off the gate, but I was able to understand. I didn't even really know what the notes were called. I was just able to understand like, oh, this one goes here, so I put my finger here and like whatever. on the piano keys and stuff. And I was really enjoying that. I was really enjoying that I was good at it, number one. And then I was really enjoying that, like, it seemed to be something that I could express myself with by playing piano. Well, fast forward to, you know, I'm good at piano. My parents are, meaning well. People at school are meaning well, and they're like, you have to be at the talent show. You're a natural musician. Blah blah blah. I go to the talent show, and I actually put on a song that I wrote myself, quote unquote, wrote myself. I made it up, and I then committed it to memory. But I did make it up completely, and it was mostly like synth based. And I played it, and I won the talent show. Now my school had these whole other issues with giving kids awards. They wanted to not give any particular kid an award, so it would be like, top 3 would get the same thing, and then they would give a bunch of participation medals. That's a whole other issue that I want to get into. Actually, it's really interesting. But yeah, I remember I played the song, whatever. I got my award, and I went running back to the kids from the class. I think this was in 3rd grade. 3rd or 4th. I went running back to the kids in the class, and I thought they were going to be excited that I won, and they were going to be excited that I showed them my talent, right? That had, at this point, at this stage, felt really impressive to like the adults around me. And I remember one of the kids straight up called me the F slur. I won't say it on YouTube because I don't think it's good, but it's what they call what you would call a gay kid if you were a horrible, miserable person and slaying a slur at them. And they called me that, and they said, like, anybody who plays piano is that. And I remember, again, I'm in 3rd grade, and I was also a first generation Mexican immigrant, and I remember, like, I do not want to lose my chance at making friends because of that. I didn't even really understand what that was at the time. Like, I'm telling you, in the US, when I moved to the US, because I did I did 1st grade in Mexico, and I did kindergarten in Mexico. When I moved to the US was the only time that I heard so many kids at such a young age be so aware of like sexual themes, like, gender, all this kind of stuff, like what stuff was, all this kind of stuff. Like, that was as a child, I didn't hear any of that in Mexico. It was only until I came to the US where those things were kind of being flung my way. Like, in Mexico, it wasn't like that. You could, I remember I was able to write little love notes and stuff like that to crushes in kindergarten. And I tried doing that in the US, and I was called the F slur. But in Mexico, it was just like normal. It was just weird. It was a culture shock for sure that I wasn't able to process as like a 2nd and 3rd and 1st grader in the US. To clarify, 1st grade in the US is completed before 1st grade in Mexico is completed. And so, like, for that reason, I kind of did the 2nd half of 1st grade again in the US, but I'm not like a year behind, if I wanna, if that makes sense. So yeah, when that happened, I was like, oh, there's another label, there's another identity that exists, that now, because of that, because of if I am that, if I play piano, it makes me that identity. I could maybe not have friends, or people make fun of me because of it, or whatever. So it has this effect on people. Like, identities and labels have this effect on people that I don't think gets talked about enough when they're applied to people in the way that they are. And if we could stop caring about the label or the identity or what that label is, I think if we could stop labeling things, it would make it easier for people to just come into their own. Like, if I didn't care, or if I hadn't cared, or if I had the idea of not caring about being that label because it's not true, because I could imagine, myself saying like, well, this is who I am, this is what I am, and like, what people say doesn't have an effect on me. But it was hard to say that because what people were saying was having an effect on me, right? Like, they said I was a musician, and then I was going to music classes, and I was, doing the singing thing and whatever. People say I'm like a good kid, and then you're trying to keep up this good kid facade, and then all of a sudden, in high school, I do some bad kid things with my friends, and it kind of gives me this like weird, cognitive dissonance and horrible kind of feelings and all these kind of things that you have to then deal with, because you get kind of, you get labeled things a bit too soon in life sometimes. And it was just always something that I think about, is how destructive labels are, even when people mean well by them. Because I don't know, like, do we need them? Like, I think if I'm trying to think, I always think about what the end game is for a lot of these ideas, right? Like the idea of labeling what something is, like what is the end game for that? And I always think like, well, you know, if there's a bunch of ways to label something, like let's say especially with like sexuality and stuff like that, because that was such a struggle for me growing up, of like hearing that word, knowing that like I was not that, but like it was just flung around so much, and I was just like so defensive, I guess, for a really long time. It was like just flung around so much, and I remember thinking like, what is even the end game of this? And the only thing I've been able to come up with is technically the end game of all of these kind of labels, especially around sexuality, is that you essentially just have nothing at the end. Like you just literally have no labels. Like just literally, there is not like 15 different segments of sexuality. It's just like, it's just blank, and people get to decide what they do with themselves. And again, there was a magical moment in early high school where that was happening with other labels. Like people did not care. I remember like, especially that group of friends, they did not care what they were called in terms of like, you know, if somebody called them the F slur or not or whatever, they did not care. And that was, and I just found that beautiful. I was like, I found that so freeing to not have to care about any, you know, slur that somebody flings at you, especially like the racial ones, right? Because I was, you know, growing up Mexican, some people come up with some very creative slurs. You know, I'm sure like, you know, anybody who comes from a minority background will be able to relate to that, to having just these labels that exist to call you something just because you were born in a certain place or by or via certain people, you know what I mean? And there was this freeing moment, like 2 years of high school, I remember, where like none of those mattered. Like there was the really bad ones, but there was even from like a simple perspective, even from the perspective of like, it was annoying to be called like a skater kid for a while. I didn't like skating. Like, why are you calling me a skater kid? Just because I liked this particular shirt, just because I liked these particular shoes. Like, they might have made these shoes to market them to skaters. It doesn't mean I'm a damn skater. Like, I just like the shoes. Or even being called, like, I remember being called an emo kid because I grew my hair out. And I remember thinking, like, I actually really don't relate or like identify with being an emo kid, like in a lot of respects. I just wanted to grow my hair out. I got bored, and I just thought it might be cool to just grow my hair out. And I was in a band, right? So then I had like the musician thing going in the back of my head of like, a lot of musicians have long hair. So now I'm growing my hair out because I have this label of a musician or whatever. But you know, at the same time, I really didn't. It wasn't really it wasn't a thought that I had that was like super decisive. It was mostly like, it would be neat if I grew my hair out. And so I tried it, right? And then you get these new labels applied. And it was so annoying growing up, man. It was so annoying. I hated being labeled a thing because I was trying to do something that I enjoyed. I hated it. I hated dealing with that. And there's so many people that have no option but to deal with that. Like, you know, if it's clothing, if it's the way you talk, you might be labeled something, but you could change those things. Imagine now being somebody that just has darker skin and they can't change those labels that people fling on them. You can't take that skin off. And, you know, my mom was that. You know, she grew up with a lot of slurs flung at her because of the color of her skin. And I think about the fact of like, you know, how idiotic that we've just allowed our ability of as human beings to label things to try to completely rule and like almost affect people. And I think about how the power that has, right? Like the powers that labels have. I think for people that are well educated, it's even more nefarious when they label people something, because they're well educated. They know that by the mere factor or the mere action, of labeling someone a certain thing, it'll have an influence in how they act, like 100%. If you label somebody something prematurely, you know, especially if they haven't really thought about who they are yet, it'll absolutely affect how they act and how they kind of move out the world and their experience. And I think really intelligent people know this, and so it's nefarious when they try to label certain groups of people certain things, certain minorities, certain vulnerable groups and things like that, or even non-vulnerable groups, but just anyone. When they try to kind of apply labels to things, they know that if a label exists, that means a behavior exists, or something that defines that label exists behind it. And when you label somebody something, it's almost this manipulative thing. Like when you label it, right? Like if they label themselves, maybe that's another question. But when you're trying to label someone something, it's like this manipulative thing of like slowly but surely you're trying to affect the way they act and they carry themselves and they experience life. And I just find that so annoying. I found it annoying in elementary school. I found it annoying in junior high. I found it annoying in high school. I found it annoying my entire life. Because it's so pervasive. I think people are just so ready to label. Kind of the same way that people are ready to, like, you know, if you ever had family members, like you're maybe struggling with weight, but then, you know, family members can't wait to point out how much you've lost or how much you've gained or whatever. You look healthy, and you know that's just how they tell you you put on a few pounds because they didn't like when you were skinny, and then they don't like when you're fat either. And like even that, right? Like all of those things have an effect on people, and I think people know to a certain extent. You kind of know that they have people, but identities and labels and things like that, I can't wait until, I don't know, until we have some sort of moment as like a species where we phase out the importance of identity and labels in a lot of ways. Like there's a little bit of poetry to it, a little bit of poetry to, like, you know, what identities are as a way to like study things, right? Like if I was studying the Aztecs, like then I would be able to study them as that kind of like almost like an identity group, because they just experienced their life and that's just what their life kind of exuded, right? And then you could maybe just label that thing that was exuded from those people at that time as like Aztec culture or something. But I don't know if, or I don't know if Aztecs thought about being Aztecs, or how much they just did, you know, what they do themselves, right? And then that was what was then painted onto their experience, and then we can just call it Aztec culture later on. But like in the moment, trying to what's that word? If you're in the moment and you're trying to apply labels to people like preemptively before they've even gotten a chance to just experience the world, to just like go through whatever it is they want to do, I think that's nefarious. I can even kind of relate it back to Albion a little bit, because I'm actually trying to get friends to play this game, right? And there's a point in Albion where you can pick whether you're a gatherer, whether you're going to do PvP content, or if you're going to do mostly solo PvE content like dungeons and stuff like that. Now them making that decision is fine, because they're deciding, they're being decisive about their choice of like, oh, you know what, I actually really liked gathering in the tutorial zone and I'm going to gather, so I'm just going to pick gather. Like I really liked fighting the enemy, so I'm just going to fight enemies. Or I really like the idea of PvPing, so actually I'm going to jump right into PvP. Them making that decision is fine because they're just experiencing the game. They're going through their experience. But now imagine if during that time, right before they chose, or at least any time before they chose, I was like, man, you really seem like a gatherer. Like you just really seem like a gatherer type. You know, oh, I noticed you were kind of like skinning more than blah blah blah. You really seem like a gatherer, and I just kind of kept pelting them with that term. It would probably influence their decision. Like when that screen comes up, they're primed to select gatherer because they've heard me say like, oh, you're such a good gatherer or whatever, you know? And there's kind of like this positive association now with your brain now wants to pick gatherer because there's this positive association that's been built. Now there are some contrarians out there in the group, but even that is manipulative. Maybe you would have picked gatherer. Maybe that's actually what you did want to do. But you're a bit of a contrarian, so you're like, no, I'm not going to let these people decide what I do. And I'm going to pick, you know, I'm going to be doing PvE content in dungeons. But even that is messing and manipulating somebody's experience, right? And actually that second example that I just mentioned, the thing of like, even when you're a contrarian and you don't want to do what people label you as, and that affects your experience, your life experience, one, very nefarious, very true, very much so happens. But also I'm almost speaking for myself as well, because there was a time period where because I really actively hated being labeled stuff. And so if somebody told me I was a musician, I would like, you know, later on in life when I realized like how, you know, I really didn't want to do that or whatever, I would do the exact opposite almost. Like I would almost like make sure that I never spoke about music or my interests and things like that. I remember when was it? It was like somebody was trying to label me like a certain social group. I can't remember what exactly it was. And I just remember thinking like, oh, I really don't want this. I care for this. And I did everything opposite. But even that was not authentic to my own experience, right? Like, I should never have allowed it to affect me at all. And I should have been given the ability to not have it affect me at all. It's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Or, you know, we shouldn't be so quick to label people things so that we can help them kind of experience themselves. It's kind of like you wouldn't point out somebody's weight if they're having weight issues. And I don't think you should point out somebody's identity if they're kind of they're trying to figure it out. I was gonna say identity issues, but that sounds very negative. But it's like you shouldn't really point out somebody's identity if they're just going through the paces of life. You know? Because you can have a major influence on it in a way. I don't know. It's not a fully baked thought that I have on this. I think I still always kind of adjust my thinking on it, because on the one hand, it's like, you know, your identity being challenged throughout life is also part of being able to decide who you actually are, like separate from labels. And it's also like a huge part. There's like an ego, you know, that goes along with it. And so it is kind of weird, I guess, because, you know, identifying with something, you know, in general is just kind of part of an ego, part of putting on a mask, or, you know, putting on I was gonna say performance, but that's not actually what I'm trying to say. Yeah, like just putting on like a costume almost of what you're supposed to be. But yeah, not a fully, it's a thought that I have a lot. Like I feel in my heart that I kind of hate labels. But it's this thought that I always kind of struggle with, of like exactly what I mean by that, you know. So sorry that I don't have it completely figured out still into, you know, well into my life. But I just know that like labels and the end game of labeling things, the end game of these kind of like of having like these kind of identities, like pre-configured identities almost. It's not that there's anything wrong with having like identifying as something, but it's like these pre-configured identities, like the end game of that loop is really to just never have any of them anymore, to just allow people to kind of grow into their own, and for that thing that they grow into to not be so closely tied to like some pre-configured identity that could in some way influence just who they are. And I think, you know, road to hell is paved with good intentions, so I could be having good intentions here and be coming off extremely disrespectful. But I think the way that I think about it is that if it was possible for people to define their own identity outside of pre-configured labels that were made up by either some, you know, academic or some news correspondent or some social group or whatever, if they could you know, decide for themselves and identify for themselves what they are outside of those pre-configured ones, I think would be healthier. It would allow people to really have a confidence or like a conviction behind what they're actually doing, versus just constantly being either on the defense of certain labels or like being affected by them in some kind of negative way. But I just realized I talked for a really long time. This was supposed to be a short one. I guess I did have a lot to say, but that topic is one that does fire me up, because I do see such, especially in the recent years, there's been such negativity around the topic of identities. And I think like as a society, we're going through these giant changes in the way that people identify. And I think in a way it's because of a rebellion of a framework that doesn't necessarily work anymore. Like, it's not, things don't have to be so templatized. And I think a lot of people, you know, there's people that are comfortable with it, there's people that are not comfortable with it, there's people that are too comfortable with it, there's people that are too uncomfortable with it. There's so many, you know, different angles and extremes. And yeah, it's just a layered topic for me. But sorry that I talked so damn much for this one. I am going to end it here, and I am going to keep grinding a little bit off video, because we really need to get to that 31 million. We have 2 days left. It looks like we're going to be at around 26 point something after I sell all these. But where I get to here, I only had one adept fawn, and it looks like the price for those actually went down. I guess there's been probably a lot on sale, because again, I'm seeing so many people gathering. Let's see what we get to once I sell everything. 26.6, 26.7. Nice. I'm happy with that. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. For those who made it to the end, I really appreciate, again, as always, just the companionship here. If you made it all the way to the end, and always appreciate the comments and the conversation. So yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.